first of all, thank all the sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. And today, I'm here because I want to tell you a story. You may have heard this story before, but it's going to take just 5 minutes, so I'm going to tell it anyway. This story is about an experiment that two scientists did on the 60s. On this experiment, they took 5 monkeys, they put them inside a cage, and this cage had a ladder in the middle. Occasionally, on top of this ladder, they put some bananas, but the trick was that if one of the monkeys tried to fetch the bananas, they would get a cold shower falling from the ceiling. And trust me, the poor monkeys, they didn't like the cold water. So when they saw the bananas, they tried to get them so they could eat, and the water started falling. They tried a couple of more times, but after a while, they realized that the bananas were forbidden. So whenever a monkey had the temptation of eating the bananas, the rest of the monkeys will team up and go for the monkey trying to eat the bananas and beat the monkey, making it fall from the ladder and avoiding the fact that one of the monkeys could fetch the bananas. So they learned that the bananas were forbidden. After a while, the scientists decided to keep going with the experiment. The next step was to replace one of the monkeys with a new monkey. Interestingly, or not that much, the monkey, when it saw the bananas, it tried to eat them. But the rest of the monkey, they knew what was going to happen. So they didn't allow him to eat the bananas. They started beating on the monkey and making it fall from the ladder. This new monkey got confused. So he tried a couple of more times because he couldn't understand what was going on. But after a while, after a couple of beatings and damages on its body, he understood that the bananas were forbidden as well. The scientists kept going and replaced yet another monkey. And this new monkey did exactly the same as its counterparts. So it tried to fetch the bananas, and the same thing happened. The rest of the monkeys stopped this new monkey from eating the bananas by beating him. The interesting part here was that the first monkey of the new generation joined the rest of the monkeys on the beating and on the stopping this new monkey. So even though he didn't see the cold water even falling, he joined the rest of the monkeys and copied the behavior. The scientists kept going. They replaced one by one all the monkeys in the cage, and they end up with a cage with 5 different monkeys that they didn't saw the cold water falling from the sky ever in their lives, but they will beat any monkey trying to go up the ladder and fetch the bananas. If you could ask one of the monkeys why they were doing that, probably the answer will be similar to something like, I don't know. This is just how things are done around here. This story may never happen. I don't know. We will never know. I don't know if it's entirely true or not. But it allows me to illustrate something that I think is happening in our industry today. Rules and practices that people keep repeating without really understanding the meaning and how those rules were created in the first place. Rules and practices that you can't question because people will see you as a junior developer, for instance. Are you a junior developer if you don't use domain-driven design in all your projects? Are you less of a professional if you don't practice TDD always? Are you in danger and all the people you love if you don't write your software using pure Haskell? We don't know. Those are questions that I ask myself according to some of the conversations that I see on different conferences and Twitter. Because we see that these rules get shared on social media, in conferences and stuff like that. And it looks like we are playing this game of Chinese whisper where people they are trying to communicate a message, but the message gets changed in the way. We keep sharing those rules, and those rules are useful. Of course they are. The thing is that those rules, they weren't created on a vacuum. They were created on a specific context. They had a meaning. And even though we share the rules, we normally don't share the context. And without the context, those rules are useless. I see a rule that I think it may be useful in my day-to-day work. So I take the rule, I try to apply it in my project, and maybe it doesn't work. So I start complaining about this rule. And then I start arguing with someone that thinks that that rule is awesome and is useful. The problem here is that we start arguing about the rule, but not about the context, not about the trade-offs. Because the important thing here is not the rule. The important thing is the trade-offs that implies every rule. We try to share those rules, and Twitter is not helping because we have the character limitation. So we share the rules, but we don't share the context. I've seen Sandy Metz giving an excellent piece of advice, about the cost of using the wrong abstraction, and that maybe sometimes it's useful to just duplicate your code. It was a 1-hour talk explaining the pros and cons of using abstractions and using duplicated code. And after a while, all I see is tweets saying, "Don't repeat yourself, it's considered harmful." So it's like we are transforming the message in the communication. We are not communicating the rules in the best way possible. When you learn new things, you start to see that there are different answers to solve the problem. It's like we can't answer yes or no, right or wrong. The only sane answer to a question in software development is probably it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on what you want to achieve. So over time you realize that there is not just the answer, it's just one other answer with some trade-offs that you have to balance. You have to know what the implications of your decisions. So those trade-offs sometimes may be beneficial to you, sometimes maybe they don't. Here it says, naturally, there is a trade-off for its exceptional fuel economy. So it's the same with software development. When we choose tools and when we choose processes, they have their trade-offs and we have to balance them. In order to understand why we keep going to do those rules, why we keep sharing those rules and using them, we need to understand how we learn. And it's a complicated thing. So during the 80s, the Dreyfus brothers, they came up with the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. They presented this model during the 80s, trying to model the process of learning a specific topic. And in this model, there are 5 different stages that we go through while learning a specific topic. We go from novice to expert. And as we will see in a moment, there are different things that are important on every stage. And we need to understand those things. First, we start being novices. When you are in this stage, it is the first time you encounter the topic that you're trying to learn. You have no experience at all with that. So you can't measure the different trade-offs of your decisions. You need rules to follow. You need rules to guide your actions. Otherwise, you will be paralyzed because you wouldn't know what to do. In this stage, trainers give rules so people can just copy those rules and apply them even without thinking. If it happens this, you apply this rule. If that happens, you use that thing. So you just don't think. You follow rules and follow the guides. In this stage, normally, we are really goal-oriented. We don't care about how we do things. We just want to do that thing that we want to do, and we don't care how. The important thing is the goal. So we don't care if it's the right or the wrong way. Just tell me what to do, I'll do it, and get on with it. On the next stage of this model, we have the advanced beginner stage. Here, people start to understand and learn the rules. They can tell the rules by memory without reading. But the important thing is that they need guidance. They are not autonomous. They need someone to guide them and to tell them when to apply those rules. They will be able to solve problems, but they will hit walls. And these walls won't let them to solve the entire problem, so they need someone watching them. On the next stage, we reach the competent level. This is the first stage where you are completely autonomous. You can solve every problem you get. Maybe you don't solve the problem using best practices or in the most performant way, but you get the job done. Maybe it's not the most elegant way of doing things, but you know the rules that were taught to you in the first stages. You apply those rules, and you can solve almost every problem in the topic you are trying to solve. In these first stages, you have the rules, and you don't really know how to prioritize those rules. They're just a list of laws, like almost sacred laws that you follow. And there is something that I've seen in my years teaching software development, that you can explain the benefits of certain tool, of certain process, you can explain the trade-offs, but people doing these first stages, novice, advanced beginner, they can't really understand those trade-offs. So I've been explaining the benefits and the trade-offs of a tool for a whole hour, and when the hour finishes, there is always this person which raises his hand and asks, yeah, but what's the best framework to do that? So it's like you could explain the trade-offs, but they won't be able to understand until they reach the top levels. Here, when you get to the proficient level, you still know the rules, of course, but you know when to apply those rules, and you know when to ignore some of those rules. The intuition in your job starts to grow, and you start to focusing more on the intuition than the rules. You know the topic that you are learning from the inside out, so you know everything there is to the topic in hand, and you can apply those rules and your intuition. When you reach this stage, you normally are a good teacher because you know the rules, you know the trade-offs, and you can explain those trade-offs to less experienced people. It's really hard to get here because normally when you reach to the proficient level, you have to overcome what I call the death valley. It's a certain process that you go through while learning, where until now you've been following rules, and now you start thinking about them really hard. And sometimes what you think that is best, it doesn't match with the rules that you've been learning so far. So you think you're going backwards in your learning process, but in fact you're going forward. You think you're going backwards because the rules don't apply sometimes, and you have to prioritize when this rule is more important than that other rule, and you start questioning those rules. That's fine, but while you are doing that process, you may think that you're going backwards, so be prepared for that. On the last level of this model, we have the expert. The expert goes beyond rules. The expert doesn't follow rules. He knows the rules, but he doesn't follow them. He doesn't really need to. Maybe there is a bug in your code, and you don't know where this bug is. And if you ask the expert will tell you probably where the bug is. But don't ask him how he knows, because he won't be able to explain you. He doesn't know how the thinking process works for him. He's just following intuition, experience, and hunches, basically. The problem with experts is that they are not normally good teachers, because they won't follow rules. They even don't remember the rules. And normally people think that the rules are being enforced to them, so they are not really good teachers. One important thing here is that through all these stages in the Dreyfus model, you may notice that the importance of rules has been changing. They've been changing from being the most important thing, the thing that we use to guide our steps or acts, to something that sometimes we even ignore. We go from here, following rules without thinking, to here, just ignoring those rules and playing by intuition. And this is fine. At first, as we mentioned before, you are not ready. You are not prepared to weigh the different trade-offs that every decision implies. You need to know the trade-offs, but you also need to know how to weigh them. The balance is the most important thing here. As I mentioned before, when you are in the first stages, you still need those rules. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't use rules. We need them. And that's why you find questions like this one, like I mentioned before. People need those guidance, need those rules. Otherwise, they will be paralyzed. They wouldn't know how to continue. So it's fine. We just need to know when they apply, when they are more important in the first stages of the Dreyfus model. And a couple of months ago, I read an article that it was really impressive to me. It said that every 5 years, the number of software developers gets doubled. So that means that every 5 years, half of the software developers in the industry have no really a large experience, right? Probably using this model, half of the population in the industry, in the software development, they are probably novice or advanced beginners, right? So that's impressive. Something that we need to think about when we discuss about things. For instance, let's test the audience. Let's raise some hands. In here, in this audience, who's been programming for at least 1 year? Okay. Who's been programming for at least 5 years? Okay, most of you. And what about 10 years? Are there anyone programming for more than 15 years? Mm-hmm. So, as we can see, the numbers it's shrinking, because while we are in the stage of software is eating the world, right? The software development movement is getting bigger and bigger. And this is important because whether we like it or not, we have a responsibility in our industry. Those new developers that join the companies that we have right now, they will look at us, at people with more experience, to know how things are done around here. On the first stages, they just copy what they see. If we follow rules blindly, they will follow those rules blindly as well. So it's our responsibility not just to explain those rules, but to explain the different trade-offs, to explain why we use those rules or why we ignore some rules. This is the important part. We are in danger of staying advanced beginners forever. We are in danger of spending too much time on Twitter arguing about rules, arguing about if using annotations is good or not, whether or not you are a real TDD developer if you don't follow the rules. I remember when I was teaching TDD to some students, I was using TDD, I was practicing TDD for a couple of years at that moment. And I remember that I was teaching TDD using the Uncle Bob rules. The first rule of you shouldn't write production code without a test that needs the code. You should, I can't remember the rules now. You know the rules, right? So I remember teaching these rules to the students and also struggling because when I was practicing TDD, sometimes I wasn't sure about following those rules. Sometimes I felt like they didn't apply. And I felt like I wasn't really doing real TDD if I wasn't following the rules. Then, during these dark times, I went back to the source. So I read the Ken Beck book on TDD, TDD by example. And then everything made sense because what Uncle Bob did was to create the rules so people in the novice and advanced beginner stages could learn TDD. And it was really, really great because TDD got to a much broader audience. It was helpful to people on the novice and advanced beginner stage to just follow those rules blindly without having to think about what should I do now, right? It's something that freed them. But maybe you don't need those rules. Yeah, of course, if you don't follow those rules, you may be called that you are not a real TDD practitioner. But who cares, right? So if you go back to the source, in this case, the TDD, the Ken Beck book about TDD, you see that those rules, they don't appear anywhere because there are some principles, there are some benefits, there are some trade-offs, and that's the important part, the benefits, the trade-offs, the costs of doing TDD. So when we are talking about software development, it's not like we have to choose the holy grail. We have to choose the answer because there is only one answer. We have to choose the process. We have to choose the tool that's right for the context where we are in at that particular moment. There is not the right or wrong. There are always costs and benefits. And we need to be clear on that for the new generations that join the software development industry. So next day you go to the office and you see your teammates. Think, there is someone in my team that I think that may benefit from my experience? Is there someone in my team that I could benefit from her experience? So if that's the case, let them know. Because we need to talk about this. We need to discuss trade-offs. We need to discuss the benefits and the costs. We can't argue on Twitter about rules anymore. So if you do that, trust me, the trade-offs on that are really beneficial. Thank you. So the talk was short, yeah, but I think we could have a kind of debate or something on your experience while teaching and while learning, of course. So if someone wants to comment on anything.
I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
So when you showed the belts, the slide with the belts, you asked for how many years what like experience, you know?
Yeah.
And do you think that the amount of years you've been coding is the best way to?
No, it depends on what you did, right?
How skilled you are.
No, of course not. It depends on what you did. There is this saying, right, that you could be You could have 10 years of experience of 1 year of experience repeated 10 times, right? So it depends on what you did, of course. It's just a measure as any other. Probably not the best one. But sometimes it's hard to measure how experienced is someone, because this intuition, as we mentioned in the proficient or in the expert levels, this intuition is hard to measure. I wouldn't know how to create a test to test intuition and experience. Sometimes we focus too much on the technical details during interviews, during tests, and so on, because it's hard to do otherwise. We just go to the less of the evils, right? It's just the best we can do, but it's not the best solution, of course.
Well, actually related to this question,
Yep.
I think that what happens, or this is my own experience, is after 10, 15 years, I think it's even worse. Because you start becoming obsolete. It's like you are learning, you need to learn new rules because of new paradigms, new things that maybe are in contradiction with your basis, nearly. I used to code in hexadecimal even or in assembly. And afterwards I learned little by little imperative programming, so on. Object-oriented, like, was like the last thing I learned in the university. And afterwards, all the stuff that came is like completely different. And you start to get a lot of vicious, a lot of things that maybe are conditioning you for learning new things and new paradigms that for sure have a lot of improvements related to the latest. And I think it's when you are becoming too far from the beginning, from the source, is worse. I think that the younger people, for instance, sometimes I need to enroll in my team more people, and I prefer the younger because like synapses are going faster and their bases are newer, and then they are smarter than me, of course, because the same way that they are taller and they are physically better, of course their brain is also physical and is better, I think. And with all this stuff together and all the new rules and the new paradigms very fresh inside the brains, I think the experience after 10, 15 years is not that important.
It's a debate, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Victor, you didn't seem to agree.
Yeah, I mean, experience of 15 years, of 15 years learning different things and getting different knowledge cannot be compared with experience of 1 year or 3 months. Now the problem is that many people have 15 years of repeated experience. Then you take somebody from university, he's better because actually you've been repeating yourself for 15 years. And that's unfortunate truth in many companies, I think.
Yeah.
But 15 years of true experience, that is I mean, that's something that everybody wants, has, and it's beneficial and all those things.
Yes, but this is not, at least it's not like a company will not maybe get a lot of benefit for one person that will learn forever.
Oh, one person that will learn forever.
Yes, it's like when you are smart in one technology or smart in one area, they want to, of course, extract some benefit from it.
Yes.
Okay. And you will, by the same reason, remain doing more or less the same during 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
You do that several times, it's like, well, okay, I got real new knowledge like 3 or 4 times in my life after the university.
Okay.
Real I'm talking about new knowledge with experience, of course.
Exactly. But that means that actually that imaginary person doesn't have 15 years of experience. It has 3 years of experience and then 12 years of repeating that experience. So that's not 15 years of experience.
Well,
That's 12 years of
But you need repetition to master.
No, of course. But I understood his comment is kind of like, oh, okay, so I've been actually, I'm inventing now the case, I spent 8 years administrating MySQL database, right? Kind of like, I mean, that's not much of experience. I mean, you need a year to really master imaginary MySQL database administration, and maybe 1 more year to become kind of like guru that knows every, kind of every single detail of it, but definitely not 15 years.
One thing there, because the learning path thing looks like it has an end, kind of thing, and it's like, oh, I got to expert. I think what I found is a lot of people who get to a level where they intuitively, sort of know what to do, etc., have a really hard time then sometimes adapting to going back to that learning. And I think that's also has a little bit to do with what you're talking about, because if you've been doing the same thing for 15 years, that's probably because you're comfortable doing that, not because there wasn't all the stuff that you needed to learn, right? And that's one part there. Don't look at it like, oh, I got here and then that's it. Sort of what I finished my degree. No, that's just the beginning. You get the essentials, the bare minimum, right? So that's one point. Now the other part, and I took some notes. Sorry. Is the idea of the knowledge that you cannot change into rules, like that tacit knowledge. And this is where experience, I think, has a huge, value there, because some things I can teach you reading a book, doing exercises, etc. Other things you just have to live through them. Okay, and when you live through, lots of projects that have gone wrong, lots of things where you just didn't have a solution. You didn't, because it's not written anywhere. It's not like you can Google. Go to Stack Overflow and someone's going to have it. Yeah, those things are really important. So I guess it depends really on who you're hiring. Sort of what you're hiring for, etc. Like finding someone who's going to be leading a department, or someone's going to. Then you just don't want them to be good technically. That's not that important anymore. It's more important that they're able to learn. It's more important that they know how to lead. They actually have experience in these situations and handling uncertainty and all of the things. So it's a trade-off, right? But you can definitely not minimize the importance of that, because there's a lot of tacit knowledge that you cannot just learn from a book.
Yes, but this knowledge is more about how do you approach problems in general.
And also people's skills, and there's a lot of other stuff. My opinion in general is that a lot of the stuff that you learn with mentorship and apprenticeship and all these things, you're not just getting the technical stuff, which is something that is lacking in a university right now, for instance, at least in my experience. Yeah. So it's both things. Let's say you're learning a set of skills that are not easily transferable. It's not like I read a blog post and you can't really turn it into. It's so complex. The context in which you have to apply it is so complex that no rules will get you there easily.
Yeah, on that regard, I remember when we had this internship for 3 months for some students. And one of the things that we decided to teach was to create an MVC framework, right? Many people ask why there are like hundreds of different MVC frameworks out there. Why to create an MVC framework? And it was about the process, right? Of first creating the MVC framework and knowing what's trying to solve, what problems the MVC framework is trying to solve, and two, also the process of suffering your own MVC framework. Right? So you know what to ask to a good MVC framework because you're suffering your own. And so we forced them to suffer their own MVC frameworks, which of course wasn't really great, right? But it was part of the process. The suffering was part of the process. And this suffering is the experience, I would say, right? So that's something that we couldn't teach them, because we could we could enumerate some rules for them, but unless they experience the suffering, it's really hard to understand the different levels of costs involved on that tool, on that decision. So sometimes you need to suffer that thing. Also, you mentioned something like that it was interesting. Sometimes you have to decide something, and your experience will make you decide one thing over the other, and you will argue with someone else that has suffered a different problem, right? So no, we need to prioritize this thing because it's more risky than that other thing, because I suffered this in my past, and the other person might suffer some other problems, some other outages on production servers, for example. So they will prioritize other stuff, right? So yeah, the experience sometimes is not this one truly thing. Is sometimes we have different experiences. I don't know if that makes sense.
Because a lot of the practice, you've been doing this for a long time. You create a habit of it. That's why it's so easy for you to do TDD because you're already into it. The minute that you have to unlearn those habits, that's when it gets tough. And that's when I see a lot of people who just, they know maybe the best solution for the thing, but they have to learn something else, so they'll just do what they know, and solve the problem with what they know, do it, get it done, that's it. That's also an important part. Yeah.
I think that the problem many people are facing is when the gap between what they know and what they should know becomes kind of like big. And then kind of like, oh, I haven't been learning new stuff for 10 years. Oh, fuck me, it's too big. It's the same thing like in technology, upgrading, right? If you're 5 years behind in your Red Hat distribution, you cannot upgrade anymore. And same thing with knowledge. If you don't adopt that type of continuous tiny improvements, same like TDD, right?
Yeah.
It becomes too overwhelming, I think, for many. I mean, many people will still, I think companies kind of like, they struggle really to avoid any non-relational databases simply because the difference became so vast.
Someone wanted to say something on there?
Yeah, I wanted to change a little bit of topic. We're like focusing on the what we have to learn to become, let's say, a master of the levels or something. And I wanted to know your opinion on how to do it. I'm really interested in learning techniques, or in your experience, how do you, or teaching techniques or things like that. What do you think, or any place to learn how to learn?
Well, in our case, we were lucky enough to hire a company that teaches stuff like that, like good structure for your courses, so people learning using your course won't be lost on the learning process, and knowing when to apply rules and when to focus more on the trade-offs, for instance. That's another thing we learned. But online resources to learn how to teach, I remember a Coursera course, but I don't know if it's still available. I don't know. So it's hard. Yeah, and of course I don't have the answers. It's just, this is experience because I've been teaching for a lot of years now, and knowing when you are teaching to someone that needs rules and when you are teaching to someone that probably needs more trade-offs than rules, it's really, really important. Because sometimes you tell the trade-offs, as I mentioned, right? Yeah, this MVC framework is good because this, and it's bad because this and that. But maybe they are not ready yet to make that call, to take that decision. So you need to identify when they need rules. In this case, this is really, really useful.
If you're looking for some like learning paths or stuff that you can, there are a couple of GitHub repositories that already have a lot of documentation on that. If you do a quick search.
The 80-20 principles we want to use.
Yeah, so there are a few.
Like they use Fire as well. So we use my SQL you need to know everything about my segment. Maybe 20% can get you very and that's what you actually use most of the selectments or whatever.
Yeah, and this is hard, as we mentioned before, also during the interview process, right? Like you're interviewing candidates because you want to make a good hire, and it's hard to create a process where you don't focus too much on the tools that you're using right now, right? It's hard to measure the experience and come up with good questions, so you know if the person is able to learn more things, eager to learn more things or not. And sometimes I think in companies that focus too much on the current technologies, maybe you don't need someone who's a Java expert. Maybe you need someone who's keen of learning Java because he already or she already knows other languages, right? So it's hard to come up with good screening processes. I don't know if you guys have worked on the interview process.
Yes, well, in our experience, what we do is we just ask for being a kata, small kata, simple, just to see how they structure the solution. And well, actually, yes, we ask for them to do that in Java as possible because it's our technology. But the most important thing for us is how they use tools, how they use all those, let's say, yes, rules that are very extended. And if they apply them because they are like trendy or because they make sense to apply them in the problem. And it's very surprising that from the same statement you can get nearly opposite approaches. Like you can see all the colors of the approaches that you maybe you cannot imagine. It's pretty interesting doing that. And I think it's the best way. The problem is that they need to invest several hours for doing that, and not everybody is ready to do that or will invest all this time.
Yeah.
We have a lot of companies here, and we have a lot of demand, and it's very difficult to hire people because all those big companies are absorbing nearly all the universities. The universities are leaving. I think the kata is for us it works.
I've seen a company's process that was you need to create a pull request to an open source project that you use. So one part of the hiring process was this pull request to see how you approach that and solve that pull request. Yeah, but I don't know. Sounds cool, but
it's not that fast. I think it will take longer than
yeah,
hours.
yeah, probably. Or you can just make a pull request to the documentation, adding a typo, right?
Another thing that we sometimes use is desk surfing. Like you go through the interview process, like you have a call, maybe you have an interview with a guy, maybe something like that. Solve this problem or whatever, and then the last filter I would say is you come here one morning and just work with someone in the team, work with the team that you're going to be hired for, and they have the final decision, which is another important part because again, it's not just how good you are technically. Like I know people were very good, but they can't be next to them because they're toxic, right?
Well, this is a very important thing, a very difficult thing also is to see how this new member will behave within your team.
I think it's very easy. You tell him he's wrong in the interview and expect how he's wrong. It's very easy. I have done it a lot of times. It's very easy. You tell him, you are wrong, indeed. I don't know. I don't care about functionality. You are stupid. And you can see very easy how
How you react. Yes, well, sometimes it's true that when we are doing the code reviews for the kata, some of them are taking like a personal thing, something that you can criticize or just doing a constructive critique. But it happens, yes, that some of them, it's like, oh, you are touching my son.
You know then that you have to handle this. Maybe it's a very big problem.
Yes, I think personal skills are even more important than technical skills.
And this is for the experience. For a novice or whatever, they don't see it. It's very hard to myself. I didn't see it 5 years ago, maybe, I don't know, or 2 years ago, I don't know. Nowadays, I want to work with people and I can argue with them, because it's the way that I can learn. Because if you know a lot of whatever you know, if I cannot talk with you, I don't understand.
I think that kind of.
Go ahead.
I think that diversity in the way of thinking. I've become to value that more and more. That the diversity in how we think can be difficult at the beginning because handling if people are too different, it can be like conflicts at the beginning. But if they have this willingness to understand each other and to talk, being kind and not aggressive, you get to a point where you get really good things from those different points of view. Because in the end, you're doing something that is difficult and covering a more broad range in a way. I think it improves your odds to do something okay, right? So I think it's good to look for that, not for everyone to be the same or to fit the culture. Or I think that's making you poorer in a way, right?
I also have impression that people try to hire people using kind of principles as if we are hiring for life. I don't have a problem with, oh, I like you, think that everything is okay, you're hired, and 3 months later when you really find out, because you're not going to know how the person for real stuff, you say, okay, this is not a match, kind of, let's separate now, kind of. So instead of taking a Catholic approach to marriage, we take a modern approach, kind of like, we are together, we get married, 3 months later, 6 months later, 6 years later, we separate, and that's kind of, that's okay. I don't see why kind of like, there is that Catholic approach.
Yes, no, this is an approach for a medium big company. For a small company, I don't know if we, for example, in our case, we cannot afford doing that for 2 or 3 people at the same time.
I understand, but I think that, of course, you should discard those that are obviously not a fit for you. But the fact is that with an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours interview, you have still no idea kind of whether you will be. So kind of more on an agile approach, prepare that actually things will change. Because we don't know. You cannot know much about the person in a few hours.
Like
unless you want to kind of, so it's closer to software craftsmanship approach of apprentices. I would now say I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, let's see how it goes. Read a certain screening process. I'm saying kind of everybody, employed, right?
This is easy to do when you are looking for someone that is starting. Like, well, I want to hire 2 or 3 people that are starting and just for growing up the team little by little. This is one need, one concrete moment, specific moment. And in other cases, when you need 2 or 3 experts for solving a big problem you have, then you have a big problem because those experts, let's say, you are asking them to solve a problem that you have for real. You need to solve it, and you need the best people, and also you need to let them work together during a lot of hours a day. Then they should fit at
I understand. You shouldn't not screen them, but the fact still stays that you will have no clear idea whether they will work out together with you or not. So kind of be prepared. I travel a lot to the US, and kind of the culture over there is quite different. Nobody is expected to stay more than a year or 2. Come and go, and we like you, we don't like you, you like us, you don't like us.
Yes, it's a more modern way.
That for a small company that is very costly. changing, filling that gap. It's
I'm not saying changing, oh, you're really good fit, go out. Just being prepared.
No, I mean, making the effort to having someone 3 months and then realize that doesn't fit and start the process again. That is for small companies that is not affordable. It's not.
I would say the other way around. For small companies, it's not affordable to keep somebody that is not a really good fit. Right? Just turn it around.
Not sure about that.
Not
sure about that.
We're gonna argue
To
that.
keep somebody who is not a good fit for your company.
If you're in a small company, you have 2 developers.
Okay, okay.
Maybe he's an asshole, but
Definition of the small.
Micro company, excellent.
Less than 150.
It's me and my wife, so I have divorced and kick her out, or I understand. That's the
Small.
Okay.
okay, so let's leave it here. Sorry for my English, I'm still just a competent. So thank you very much.